The night was heavy with the silence of a desert sky, punctuated only by distant whispers of the wind across golden dunes. Inside the grand palace of Emir al-Faris, the billionaire sheikh stood alone, his gaze fixated on the sprawling city lights beneath him. The cold gleam of the gold-plated rails reflected the tumult in his heart. A heart sworn to command, yet shaken by a secret he had buried deep. The air was thick with the scent of rare jasmine and oud, curling through the marble pillars and rich Persian carpets. This fortress of opulence was his kingdom, but tonight it felt like a prison. For years he had been ruthless, an unyielding master of his own fate, and yet the fragile knock at his door shattered his cold resolve. She entered softly, her eyes a trembling blend of fear and courage. Her dress, modest but elegant, fluttered with every step, a stark contrast against the grandeur that surrounded them. She held something in her arms. His gaze snapped to the small, swaddled bundle, a child glowing with innocence and silent truth. The quietness of the room was invaded by a sudden tempest of disbelief. How is this possible?" he whispered, the usual steel of his voice now cracking under the weight of the moment. Her hands tightened around a baby, her chin lifted defiantly, despite the tremor in her voice. "You forgot me, but I never forgot you. This is your legacy, though it might undo everything you've built." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken memories and betrayals. The billionaire sheikh's mind raced. Years of scheming, power plays, and distance all converged into a single breathless revelation. His carefully constructed world was splintering around him. The grand chandeliers cast shimmering reflections over his sharp features, now marred by shock and disbelief. The desert night outside mirrored his turmoil, vast, endless, and merciless. Yet within that moment, vulnerability flickered in his eyes, an emotion he'd long buried beneath layers of gold and steel. She stepped forward, the infant cradled protectively. "I came back, not for your power, but to claim what is ours. Will you accept this child, or will you turn away once more?" He opened his mouth, words tangled in a storm of pride and fear. The silence stretched, heavy enough to suffocate the space between them. Then, finally, a slow, uncertain breath escaped him, a crack in the armor of the billionaire sheikh. Before the secrets of this desert kingdom unravel even further, make sure you're part of our caravan of stories. Many destinies are yet to be forged, and you won't want to miss a single moment. Leave a like if the heart of this billionaire sheikh already intrigues you. Tell us in the comments, from which city do you follow this saga? And what twist do you think awaits next? Your passion for these dramas inspires us to keep telling these tales. Thank you for being with us. The billionaire sheikh's breath trembled, heavy and uneven, as though the weight of the desert itself pressed down on his chest. The child in her arms was achingly real, fragile, innocent, and yet the undeniable proof of a past he had tried desperately to erase. His gaze flickered between the swaddled bundle and the woman who dared to cross the threshold of his sanctuary, uninvited and unyielding. The silence that followed her words was suffocating. "Your legacy," he finally managed, voice barely more than a hoarse whisper, has been my burden and my fortress. How long did you carry this secret in the shadows of your heart? Her eyes, glistening yet fierce, did not waver. For years, watching you from afar, knowing that the man you became was not the one I loved, I hoped you'd remember me, remember us, but time made you colder. And so I came, not to plead, but to claim. His mind spun, a tempest darker than the endless dunes outside. Memories flooded in unbidden, laughter lost beneath veils of pride, promises shattered amid whispers of court politics. How had they arrived here, standing on the precipice of truth and destruction? And what if I refuse? If I cast aside the past as you say I have? What claim does this child have on my name, my empire? She took a steadying breath, the scent of jasmine and oud mingling with the sharp edge of her resolve. She is yours by blood. Whether you choose to accept her or not, she carries your name and your right. You cannot deny her existence without losing a part of your soul. The room felt smaller, the marble walls closing in with the oppressive heat of memory and emotion. The chandeliers flickered as if sensing the fragility of the moment. Outside, the desert whispered secrets long buried beneath the sands. He moved forward abruptly, voice low and edged with pain. Why now? Why reveal her now, after all these years of silence? What have you been hiding all this time? Her lips pressed into a determined line. I hid because I feared what you had become. A man unrecognizable, ruthless, and distant. I feared that revealing this truth would only destroy what little chance of peace remained between us. For the first time, vulnerability cracked through his veneer. His shoulders slumped slightly, the unyielding facade faltering under the weight of his own regrets. You don't know the battles I've fought, inside and out. This kingdom demands loyalty and strength, not softness. Softness, she echoed, stepping closer, the whispered rustle of her dress breaking the stillness, is what makes us human. And this child is proof that beneath the steely exterior, you are still capable of love. A sudden sharp cry broke the tension. The baby's hands curled, blinking up with wide eyes that reflected a fragile trust neither of them had deserved until now. The Sheikh's hardened heart trembled. He reached out, hesitating, then braced himself as the infant's tiny fingers curled around his index finger with a grip unyielding in its innocent claim. His voice cracked. This changes everything. And yet, nothing will change unless you choose to stand with us, he said softly. The court will not accept a secret like this lightly. There will be those who see the child as a threat, a weapon, or worse, a scandal. The storm that had been gathering in his soul now surfaced in a hard, bitter laugh. A scandal? You think I care what the court believes? I built my empire on their fear, their respect. They know the price of crossing me. She shook her head. But can your empire withstand the truth? Even the most powerful men can be toppled by secrets. He paced, the heavy Persian carpets muffling his footsteps, while his mind raced through strategies, alliances, and betrayals. Yet beneath the calculating exterior, a raw ache gnawed, a longing he buried with every decree, every display of dominion. The firelight cast fleeting shadows across his face, revealing the cracks in his armor. "If I accept her," he admitted, voice low and strained, "what will happen to us, to the life I have forged?" Her eyes softened, touched by the flicker of hope that dawned against the backdrop of pain. "We have a chance to rebuild, not just for the child, but for ourselves. A family born anew from the ashes of past mistakes." He stared long into those eyes, beautiful, resolute, and felt a pang of a future he no longer dared to imagine. "Then tell me," he said quietly, the flicker of a smile betraying both fear and yearning. "Who needs to know? Who will stand with me when the walls of this palace tremble under the weight of this secret?" She held out the child, offering the fragile hope cradled within those tiny fists. "The truth has a way of breaking chains, if you're brave enough to face it." Outside, the desert night deepened, stars twinkling like distant promises. Inside, the air hummed with tension as the billionaire sheikh took a step closer to a fate he had fought for so long to avoid, and yet could no longer escape. A sudden, urgent knock echoed through the grand hall, sharp and insistent. His eyes narrowed, the storm in his heart matched now by the thunder outside. Someone summoned him, and the secrets he tried to keep buried were about to rise like the desert monsoon, fierce and unstoppable. The urgent knock echoed through the vastness of the grand hall, sharp enough to slice through the thick veil of tension lingering between them. The billionaire sheikh's narrowed eyes flicked toward the heavy door, his body taut like a drawn bowstring. The glow from the chandeliers refracted off the glistening gold trim of his robes, mirroring the turmoil that roiled beneath his composed exterior. Her grip tightened imperceptibly on the infant, whose soft coos momentarily softened the brittle silence. Yet even the child's innocence could not quell the tempest that threatened to unravel the fragile truce forming in this room, drenched with memories and secrets. He forced himself to step forward, each stride heavy with the weight of an empire balanced delicately on the edge of revelation. The footsteps that answered the knock were steady, but carried a threat barely contained. A slender figure slipped through the threshold. Malik, his most trusted advisor, eyes sharp as desert hawks, face etched with concern and unreadable intent. "The court is restless," Malik said gravely, his voice low and deliberate. "Whispers have reached the palace, rumors of your secret returning, and the child." His gaze drifted to the bundle cradled gently in her arms, then back to the sheikh. "They question your resolve, your highness. Some see this as weakness. Others see opportunity." The sheikh's jaw clenched. Years of rule had taught him that power was not just wielded in grandeur, but nurtured in shadows. He had built walls of steel around his heart, but now those walls trembled. "And what do you advise?" The question was sharp, but laced with a rare fragility, as though he sought a lifeline amid this storm of doubt. Malik stepped closer, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. A public acknowledgement would shatter more than the court's murmurs. There will be enemies ready to strike, allies forced to recalibrate. Your image, the invincible, unyielding Sheikh Billionario, must survive intact. His eyes held the weight of wars won and lost in the silence between his words. She stood silent, watching the interplay of power and vulnerability etching itself across his face. The air around them thrummed with unspoken questions. Could this man, so cruel and commanding, yet broken beneath facade, forge a new destiny without destroying the legacy he had fought to claim? The child stirred, tiny hands stretching out, a fragile beacon amid uncertainty. Her voice was steady when she spoke. We do not have the luxury of silence anymore. The truth will come to light, whether we face it or hide beneath lies. And in those words, the night seemed to hold its breath. The billionaire Sheikh's gaze lingered on the delicate face of his child. Eyes dark pools, reflecting the countless desert stars beyond the palace walls. A vow whispered silently, protector, ruler, father. Suddenly, the heavy doors burst, open again. This time, the footsteps were not just steady. They belonged to the head of the palace guard, breathless and wide-eyed. "Your Highness," he said, voice tight with urgency. "There's been an attack outside the city walls. Rebels, or worse, ambitious nobles. They've taken the caravan bringing supplies from the south." A cold shiver traced the Sheikh's spine. The timing was no coincidence. It felt orchestrated. The strike, aimed not just at his empire's food and wealth, but at the very heart of his power, at the edges of his control fracturing in this moment of weakness. "Gather the council," the Sheikh ordered, voice now steel forged anew. "Every moment from now is a battle." She met his eyes. No longer only fear or accusation, but an unspoken alliance blooming in the haze of turmoil. The child's soft breath warmed her cheek, a reminder of what was at stake. He turned, cloak swirling like the desert wind, majesty reborn amidst chaos. But as the guards scrambled and the palace stirred with urgent preparation, a shadow moved silently behind the tapestries. A figure draped in midnight silk, with eyes like burning coals. The whisper of a dagger sliding free, a subtle smile curling darkly, and a single word, barely audible above the storm gathering within the palace walls. Finally, the head of the palace guard's breath caught sharply as he burst through the heavy doors. His words hung in the air, a brutal decree, slicing through the fragile tension like a scimitar. The caravan bearing vital supplies had been ambushed just beyond the city's protective walls. Rebels or treacherous nobles, the culprit was unknown, but the message was clear. The timing reeked of calculated malice. The billionaire Sheikh's dark eyes narrowed, storm clouds gathering behind the gold flecks of his irises. He felt the familiar surge of command rise within him, but it was tempered now by a deeper, raw ache, his fortress of control trembling beneath the weight of his newest secret. The child in the woman's arms stirred softly, tiny fingers brushing against the edge of her cloak. "They strike now," he said, voice low and edged with iron, "when we are weakest." Malik stepped forward, the ever-loyal advisor's gaze flickering between the Sheikh and the woman cradling his blood. "Your Highness," the court's whispers have blossomed into open concern. Power shifts like desert sands. Anyone sensing vulnerability will move to claim what you have built. A heavy silence swallowed the room. Outside, the desert wind howled like a mourning beast, rattling ancient pillars and shaking chandeliers that threatened to spill shimmering light onto marble floors. The air inside felt thick, as though even the rare jasmine and oud resisted breathing freely. The woman's eyes met his, those fierce, endless pools of storm and hope. The court will not stay silent. If you deny this child or try to hide her, you will ignite fires far fiercer than any caravan attack. Your enemies will see her as a weapon, a weakness to exploit. He swallowed hard. The empire he had forged with relentless will was not only built on whispered threats, but on an image. An impenetrable Sheikh Billionario who could weather any storm. Now that image felt brittle, fracturing under the spotlight of a secret that refused to be buried. "Then we prepare for war," he said, the declaration rippling through the chamber like an edict of fate. His fingers twitched, tightening momentarily, as he ran a hand through obsidian hair flecked with silver strands. "The council?" Malik urged. "Yes," the sheikh answered. "Summon them at once. No room for hesitation." As Malik bowed and hurried out like a shadow dissolving into the night, the sheikh's gaze returned to the woman and the fragile bundle nestling against her heart. A venomous whisper echoed in his mind. How many battles would this secret drag them into? How many more lives would be risked to protect a truth that threatened to unravel everything? Her voice cut through his dark thoughts, steady and unyielding. "We face them together. No more games of silence." For a heartbeat, the cold armor that had encased his heart wavered. The child's soft sigh and the gentle press against his chest reminded him of promises made beneath star-streaked skies, long forgotten. A flicker of longing shone within the steel of his features. The grand hall shifted suddenly from a place of looming dread to a crucible of raw possibility. Then, from the shadows beyond the golden tapestries, a slender figure emerged, silent as a desert breeze. Cloaked in midnight silk, eyes burning with unspoken menace, the assassin's presence was a silent tornado destined to disrupt. The sharp glint of a dagger whispered free from its sheath, the steel kissed by the faintest dawn of candlelight. A slow smile curled across the intruder's lips, bitter and triumphant. Finally, the murmur coiled through the space, a venomous promise slicing sharp through the clamor of approaching chaos. In that instant, the billionaire sheikh felt the walls of his sanctuary close tighter. The night's silence fracturing like fragile glass. The weight of past sins and future threats pressed down on him, not just as a ruler, but as a father, as a man caught between the empire he cherished and the family he was only beginning to understand. He stepped forward, cloak billowing behind him, eyes alight with fierce determination. The battle, both within and beyond, had only just begun. And in the eye of this desert storm, one truth glimmered with brutal clarity. Survival demanded courage, not just on the battlefield, but in the depths of a broken heart. The dagger's shadow quivered, a deadly dance awaiting the breaking point. The assassin's shadow lingered, barely breathing, as the dagger gleamed in the dim light, poised for the moment the billionaire sheikh's resolve faltered. Yet, from within, a fierce flame ignited, not one of surrender, but of reckoning. The sheikh moved with sudden, lethal grace. His hand shot out, fingers closing around the inch of steel before it could claim a breath. The smile on the intruder's lips twisted into frustration, eyes flashing with a dark promise of returning storms. But the room was no longer as silent or defenseless as it had been moments ago. Enough! The sheikh's voice dropped, low and commanding, reverberating against the marble walls. Reveal yourself. The figure hesitated, then stepped forward into the flickering candlelight. A woman, clad in black silk that clung like shadows, her eyes cold embers of vengeance and past betrayals. The subtle scar that traced her jawline spoke of battles fought beyond this palace's gilded cage. You cannot hide the truth forever, Al-Faris. His jaw tightened at the whispered name, not just a ruler, but the man she knew more fiercely than any, the presence of this ghost from an unfinished past. Slice through the fragile alliance he had just begun to forge. The child nestled once again to the chest of the woman who dared claim him as father, wriggled, sensing the sudden tension. What do you want? The sheikh's words were clipped, but laced with the weight of unspoken wars and the sharp edge of impending choices. She smiled. No warmth, only the cold calculation of a predator closing in. Justice. Revenge. The empire you've built with silence will crumble under the weight of my truth. The runes seemed to shrink, the gold and marble suddenly brittle under the crushing pressure of long-buried sins now clawing toward the surface. The sheikh's gaze flicked to the woman who held his child, her handshake steady despite the storm, and then back to the shadow, threatening all he had ever controlled. I promise protection, he growled, voice dark and edged with paternal ferocity, and I will not break that vow. Yet, even as he spoke, the fractures in his empire yawned wider. Malik's earlier words echoed relentlessly. Power shifts like desert sands, and vulnerability is a beacon to enemies. This new threat was more than a dagger in the dark. It was a reckoning. The assassin, this woman of scars and whispered vendettas, took a slow step backward, but her voice carried the sting of 1,000 wounds. You cannot reclaim the past by burying it. You built your throne on lies, and those lies have a price. Before the sheikh could reply, another shout pierced the air, a frantic cry from the corridors beyond. The guards rushed in, faces pale with panic and urgency. More rebels. They're attacking the eastern gates. The city could fall before dawn. A storm erupted in the sheikh's chest. The fragile hope he'd clung to threatened to shatter beneath the relentless tempests of war and betrayal. The woman who held his child stepped to his side, unwavering, a pillar amidst the chaos. We stand together, she said, voice steady, eyes locking with his. For our child, for what we still can be. He reached out, fingers brushing against the infant's soft cheek, heart twisting with a tumult of love and fear. The fragile life nestled there was the still point in a twisting storm, an anchor to a future he dared not imagine but could not now deny. Turning sharply, His command rang out. "Summon the council. Prepare the city. Nothing will fall while I stand." But even as the palace buzzed with rapid preparations, the overwhelming weight of the evening bore down. The whispered threats, the dagger's promise, the cries of battle beyond the walls. The night stretched endlessly before him, a desert expanse of impossible choices. And somewhere, hidden in the labyrinth of power and pain, a deeper secret stirred, but truth that could either shatter his empire or finally set him free. His eyes, once cold and impenetrable, now glimmered with a dangerous hope and the flicker of vulnerability. The assassin's words echoed with chilling finality. The empire he ruled was built on lies. But what if the greatest lie was yet to be revealed? The soft coo of the child broke through the gathering storm. The woman looked to him, unwavering. The Sheikh Billionaire, sovereign of countless hearts, now faced his greatest battle, not against armies or courts, but against the shadows of his own past, clawing their way back into the light. And in that breath of silence before war, the heavy doors slammed open once more. A figure emerged, drenched in sweat and bearing a sealed scroll, its waxed emblem shattered, a herald of a new and devastating decree that would redefine everything. The Sheikh's eyes narrowed, pulse racing as he grasped the fragile parchment. The ink told of a betrayal closer than he dared to imagine. His voice cut through the charged air, a whisper freighted with defiance and dread. "They've turned their blades inward." The sealed scroll trembled slightly in his hand, as if it bore the weight of every whispered betrayal that had ever echoed through the marble halls of his palace. The wax was cracked, the emblem near destroyed, an ominous sign that only deepened the shadows gathering in the Billionaire Sheikh's eyes. A cold wind swept through the vast chamber, stirring the heavy drapes and carrying with it the scent of jasmine that seemed less comforting now, more like a fragile veil over a roaring storm. He tore open the parchment, the brittle paper rustling like dry leaves beneath the desert sun. The words spelled disaster, a covert alliance forming. Within his council, nobles conspiring under the cover of night, a betrayal far closer than any enemy beyond the city walls. His name was at the center of it all, a target to be brought low not just by foes, but by those he had once trusted. The woman holding his child took a step closer, her arm tightening protectively around their fragile hope. Her eyes met his, fierce yet steady. "They have turned their blades inward," he said quietly, voice heavy with the weight of this revelation. A harsh silence followed, thick and suffocating. Outside, the desert night howled anew, a wild, relentless beast. Within the palace, the grandeur seemed to shrink, marble pillars towering over them like ancient sentinels silently watching empires fall and rise. He looked down at the infant's peaceful face, a small island of innocence amid the sea of treachery. "We are surrounded." Malik's voice cut through the charged air as he re-entered the chamber. "Not only by rebels and rival nobles, but by those sworn to serve you." Whispers turned to plotting, Your Highness. "Your position is more precarious than ever." The Billionaire Sheikh's jaw clenched, muscles taut. Every instinct he had ever known screamed for domination, for crushing all opposition beneath his boot. Yet now a new war gnawed at him, one not fought with swords or coins, but with shadows, secrets, and broken loyalties. He turned to the woman, his breath shallow. If we cannot trust the council, where do we begin? How do we protect our child and ourselves? She swallowed hard, fighting the tremor in her hands. We start by exposing the traitors, but it will require more than strategy. It will demand courage, sacrifice, and trust. Her gaze lingered on him, searching, challenging. Do you still have either for me? For us? Her question strangled the air between them. The image of the ruthless, unyielding Sheikh Billionaire, fractured beneath the vulnerability she unmasked. The cold armor slipped away. For a heartbeat, revealing a man haunted by love and regret. He reached out, fingers brushing the soft cheek of their child, a touch so gentle it almost startled him. This child, she is the heart of everything I have fought to build. If I lose her, I lose more than an heir. I lose the last piece of myself. She stepped forward, courage melting the distance. Then we face the storm together. No more silence, no more secrets. The flickering candlelight traced the lines of his face, sharp and conflicted. Outside, the clash of armor echoed, signals of rebellion rising like a tide against the palace walls. Suddenly, the heavy doors burst open once more, spilling shadows and light. A messenger, drenched in sweat and fear, fell to the floor, eyes wild. Your Highness, the eastern gates are under siege. The rebels have erupted sooner than anticipated. A fierce determination ignited in the Sheikh's gaze. Then the battle begins tonight. His voice snapped commands that rippled through the palace. The call to arms, the summoning of allies, the stealing of hearts for a war that was now as much internal as it was external. Yet, amidst the rising chaos, his thoughts remained anchored to the woman holding their child. For all the power he wielded, this fragile family was his true battlefield. She looked at him, unwavering. There is another danger you must know. Those who would use this child as a pawn, bargaining chips in a deadly game. He frowned, shadows deepening beneath his eyes. Enemies hiding behind smiles. Friends who wear masks. A steely resolve settled over him. Then we root out every snake in the garden. For her, for us. The distant cries of guards and the pounding of war drums melded with a sudden, chilling sound, the softest of whispers, that slipped through even the thickest stone walls. An unexpected voice spoke from the shadows, low and venomous. You think this child makes you vulnerable, Sheikh Billionaire? But the real weakness lies in the wounds you carry. He turned sharply, eyes narrowing to slits. Through the flickering light stepped a figure, a man cloaked in dark silk, features obscured, but eyes burning with familiarity and malice. This empire you clutch so tightly, the stranger hissed, is a fragile illusion, and I have come to tear it apart. The Shah's heart hammered fiercely, not just with the urgency of battle, but with the dawning realization that the deepest enemy was one he had never truly seen coming. As the walls closed in and the palace trembled under the weight of shattered trust and impending war, the Billionaire Sheikh faced a truth more terrifying than any army. The past he tried to bury would rise to claim him, and only by embracing the storm could he hope to survive it. Outside, the desert wind roared, a war cry as ancient as the sands themselves. And within the palace, beneath gilded arches and fragile hopes, the first blade was raised, not by a rebel army, but by a ghost from the shadows of his own soul. The fight for the Sheikh's legacy had become a fight for his very survival. The scroll trembled between his fingers like a cruel heartbeat. Every crease and tear whispered betrayal. The guild seal, once a symbol of power and loyalty, had been shattered beneath the weight of conspiracies darker than the desert night. He unfolded the brittle parchment, eyes searing through its harsh truth. A network of traitors nested deep within his own council, their greed and envy poised to shatter his empire from within. A cold gust slipped through the open chamber, swirling jasmine petals across the mosaic floor. The woman tightened her hold on the child, whose fragile breath traced soft rhythms against her collarbone. Her gaze locked with his, fierce and unwavering, as though daring him to confront the abyss that had opened before them. "We are ensnared." Malik's voice cut through the silence, his alert presence filling the space with an unspoken urgency. The rebellion outside is but the first wave. The spearbrand lies among those sworn to serve. Every whispered secret breeds a new faction, each shadow a conspirator ready to strike. His jaw clenched, the old steel beneath his skin returning with a fierce sharpness. Years of ruling the desert's vast sands had taught him one law above all. Power demanded sacrifice and ruthlessness. But now, that same power fractured his soul in ways no enemy's sword ever had. He moved toward the ornate window, the city's glow, a dim reflection of the turmoil burning within. If the enemy is inside my walls, beneath my very roof, how do I unravel a knot so tightly wound? His voice barely rose above the desert wind, moaning outside. The woman stepped forward, her silhouette framed by gilt arches and flickering lantern light. "We start with truth. The lies that have suffocated this palace must be ripped open, not just to save your reign, but to preserve what remains of this family." Her words settled on him like the desert's first rain, rare, essential, and unsettling. His thoughts flashed back to endless nights of cold solitude, where ambition alone had carved the lines of isolation around his heart. This secret child, the fragile embodiment of love and rebellion, had redefined everything he had believed. A low cry startled the tense room, the infant stirring, tiny fists curling as if sensing the storm ahead. The sheikh felt an unfamiliar tightness crush his throat, an ache he dared not name. "There is no sanctuary in silence," she whispered. "The child is both our shield and our reckoning." He turned, eyes dark wells of conflicted fire. "The council will see her as an opening, a weapon to wield or a weakness to exploit. They will tear at the fabric of this house until nothing remains." Her gaze softened, but the resolve didn't waver. "Then we strengthen the walls with those who remain loyal. Not all are lost to greed. Some still believe in your vision, and in the promise this child carries." Malik re-entered, his heavy footsteps reverberating like a herald of doom. "Your Highness, the eastern gates bleed. The rebels surge with a force unexpected and brutal. This is no longer a siege of soldiers, but of hearts and minds." His eyes flick to the woman and child. Your secret has set the desert ablaze. The gravity of the moment coiled tight inside the Sheikh's chest. He moved with sudden decisiveness, the cloak around his shoulders rippling, as he crossed to the council chamber's grand doors. "Assemble the trusted," he commanded, voice resonating with bedrock authority. "Tonight, we unmask betrayal and decide the fate of this empire." The woman followed, her steps steady, despite the cold tremor she felt beneath her ribs. Between them, the child's warmth was a fragile flame against the gathering darkness. Ahead, the palace corridors buzzed with urgent whispers and clamorous preparations. Servants hurried like desert winds, guards sharpened blades, and nobles hastened in robes embroidered with silver threads that gleamed like venomous snakes. He paused, hand resting on the carved doorframe, eyes shadowed by the weight of his kingdom and the new burden of fatherhood. The legacy he had fought for was now a battleground of blood and secrets. Suddenly, a familiar voice slithered from the depths of the chamber, a voice coated with ice and unspoken vendettas. "You believe you can control the storm you've sown, Alferis." The words cut clean and lethal. From the half-light emerged the shadowed figure of a man whose very presence frayed the edges of the Sheikh's composure. Cloaked in dark silk, his eyes gleamed with a bitterness born of old wounds. The Sheikh's breath caught, heart pounding with a dread that no army could quell. "You," he said, tone a razor's edge. "I have not come with sword in hand, but with the truth that will unravel you," the stranger hissed. "Your empire is but a mirage, built on the broken promises you left to rot beneath the desert sun." The woman stepped forward, her voice calm but charged with a fierce courage born of protection. "Every empire has its cracks, but our strength lies in facing them, not running from the shadows." For a fleeting moment, the room held its breath, the clashing of titans poised in silent war. The infant's soft cooing was the only fragile pulse within this maelstrom of power and old grievances. The Sheikh squared his shoulders, eyes blazing with the storm, born from years of toil and grief. "Let the court see the truth. Let the traitors come out from their holes. I will stand, not as the cold monarch they fear, but as the father who refuses to surrender his soul." The dark visitor's smile curled, a predator's acceptance of a new game. "Then prepare yourself, Sheikh Billionaire. For the greatest betrayals are those closest to your heart." The heavy doors thundered open again, heralding a rider wrapped in urgency. Breathless and grim, the messenger thrust a blood-stained banner into the Sheikh's grasp. "The southern oasis has fallen, Your Highness. Rebels march under the banner of your bloodline," the rider gasped. "They claim the child, your legacy, as their own call to war." A feral rage ignited within the Sheikh's chest, fueled by love, fear, and the brittle pride of a man facing the collapse of all he held dear. His hand clenched the banner tight, the lines between ruler and father blurring with piercing clarity. "In this endless desert," he vowed, voice a furnace of defiance, "I will not let darkness conquer the light we have kindled. We will burn through the night, and from the ashes rise stronger than before." The child's tiny fingers grasped his coat, as if binding him to a destiny more profound than power or throne. Outside, the winds began to howl, an ancient warning carried on the breath of the desert. Within the palace walls, the true battle had only just awakened, and beneath the glimmering stars, the billionaire Sheikh's heart thundered with one immutable truth. This war would be fought not only in sand and steel, but in the fragile promise of a family betrayed, and a secret desperate to claim its rightful throne. The scroll slipped from the Sheikh's fingers, fluttering to the marble floor like a fallen feather lost in a desert storm. The weight of the betrayal it revealed pressed down on him more crushingly than the endless sands outside. Each word was a shard of ice in his heart. Conspirators, weaving plots in the shadows of his own council. Whispered alliances to undo everything he had built. His breath hitched. The grand chamber felt suddenly too vast, too cold, an opulent tomb bearing down on his fractured reign. The scent of jasmine and oud, once soothing, now hung thick and heavy, a suffocating veil over the fragile hope cradled close to his chest. She stepped closer, despite the gravity in the air, holding their child as though shielding a fragile flame from the rising winds. Her eyes, fierce and unwavering, held the steady hum of defiance. They will come for us, Alferes, those who see weakness where there is hope. The rebellion you face is bred not just in distant camps, but inside these very walls. Malik's footsteps echoed down the hallway, resolute and urgent. He entered swiftly, his face carved with grim resolve. The eastern gates are bleeding, my Sheikh. The rebels surge faster than expected. This attack is no mere coincidence. It's a coordinated strike meant to unravel your power piece by piece. The Sheikh's gaze burned into the fading light outside the window, where the first blush of dawn threatened the horizon. A war within and without, he murmured, voice edged with steel tempered by exhaustion. Then let them come. We will meet fire with fire. Turning, he found strength in the woman's unflinching gaze, the defiant promise of family forged in the fiercest storms. She bent to settle the child into a silken cradle, her fingers brushing softly over the infant's brow. The tiny hand stretched upward, grasping at the air, fragile and yet filled with quiet determination. "Have you gathered those you trust?" he asked, voice low, the leader and the father entwined in every word. "There are few," she admitted, "but enough. The court is fractured, yes, but not without allies who still believe in your vision and what this child represents." A shadow slipped suddenly from a side passage, cloaked and silent. The door to the chamber snapped open. Eyes narrowed, the Sheikh's hand dropped instinctively toward the dagger concealed beneath his robe. But it was Malik who stepped forward, holding a sealed letter, its wax emblem marred by intentional defacement. "Another message, Your Highness," Malik said, voice grim, "signed in blood and deceit." With a steady hand, the Sheikh broke the seal, the parchment unfolding like a curse writ in ink. Names of traitors hidden within his trusted circle burned into his mind like coals. Plans outlined for a coup, the usurping of a throne already teetering on fragile ground. His chest tightened. Every lesson sharpened by years of desert politics whispered that trust was a luxury for the foolish. But every flicker of tenderness ignited by the child at his side reminded him why he must believe in something more resilient than fear. "Prepare the council," he commanded, voice a low thunder rolling through the room. "Tonight, we strip the snakes from among us." She stepped forward, the warmth of her presence a steady flame against the biting cold of betrayal. "We face them together, not just as ruler and subject, but as family." Outside, the wind howled through the palace spires, carrying with it the distant cadence of war drums pounding against the desert night. As shadows lengthened and allies gathered with cautious whispers, a single chilling realization clenched his heart. The battle was no longer about power alone. It was a fight for his child's future, for a legacy threatened by the very blood that ran through his veins. A sudden, sharp cry shattered the tension. A messenger burst through the chamber doors, breathless and wild-eyed. "Your Highness, the southern oasis has fallen. The rebels march under your bloodline's banner. They claim the child, your heir, as their symbol to ignite the war." The Sheikh's fingers clenched the armrest, nails biting into finely tooled leather. His gaze locked on the woman holding the infant, the fragile center of all his fears and hopes. "We will burn through the darkness," he vowed, voice low but fierce. "And from these ashes, our true empire will rise." A soft sigh came from the child, tiny fingers curling around the edge of the silken shawl. The simplicity of that gesture crushed through the layers of steel and fire in the Sheikh's heart. The heavy doors thundered open once more, and the figure of a man stepped forward from the shadows, a figure carved from vengeful memories and old wounds, his eyes burning with malice and a bitter promise of destruction. "You think this secret child is your shield," the stranger hissed, voice like a desert serpent's whisper. "But I am the dagger meant to pierce your facade. You have ruled on lies long enough. Now you face the reckoning." For a heartbeat, the chamber froze, luxury and power rendered meaningless in the face of ghosts. Clawing back from the past, the Sheikh's jaw tightened, his voice unmistakably steady, carrying the full weight of desert storms. "Then come, let the truth be the battlefield where empires crumble or rise anew." Outside, the desert stirred, the stars shuddered beneath the dawn's first light. Inside, a palace on the brink held its breath, and the billionaire sheikh knew the greatest battle was only just beginning. Because sometimes the fiercest wars are fought in silence, forged by blood and broken promises, and the fragile promise of a child's future hanging in the balance. The dawn crept slowly across the horizon, casting soft amber light through the sweeping arches of the grand palace. The desert outside, once a vast canvas of shadows and secrets, now seemed to breathe a tentative promise of peace. Inside, the vast hall was alive with whispers, but no longer of conspiracy or betrayal. Now they spoke of hope, redemption, and a future reborn. Al-Faris, the billionaire sheikh, stood tall but changed, no longer the lone sovereign cloaked in cold command, but a man softened by love and tempered by truth. His dark eyes, once sharp and unyielding, now held the tender glow of a father who had faced his demons and chosen to protect what truly mattered. The woman who had returned to his life, his heart, stood beside him, radiant and resolute. Her hand rested gently on the cradle where their child slept peacefully, the fragile life that had shattered walls and built new bridges. In that quiet moment, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by the delicate dawn of a family united. Behind them, the council assembled, not as wary foes ready to strike, but as witnesses to a new order. The traitors who had schemed in shadows had been unmasked. Justice had moved swiftly, guided by the Sheikh's unwavering will and the unyielding truth they now embraced. Some had fallen, others bent the knee to the future he resolved to build, a realm worthy of his legacy and the child who was its living promise. Alferes turned to face the assembly with a steady voice that carried the strength of desert winds and the warmth of newfound compassion. Let this be the era in which we no longer hide behind fear and secrets, he declared. Our strength lies not in silence, but in the courage to confess, forgive, and rebuild. A ripple of agreement flowed through the chamber. The walls echoed with the first soft steps toward reconciliation, a symphony of resolve that even the desert's silence could not contain. In the quiet alcove beyond, the child stirred, stretching delicate fingers, awakening to a world shaped now by love rather than war. The woman smiled, her gaze meeting the Sheikh's with a spark that had survived storms and betrayals alike. He lowered himself beside them, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from the child's forehead. "You are the light that has torn through the darkest nights," he whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "Our reckoning. And our salvation." The palace seemed to breathe with them, a fortress transformed into a home. Walls that had once guarded secrets now held laughter, soft footsteps, and whispered dreams. The jasmine scent hung lighter, mingling with fresh blooms from the restored gardens, petals kissed by the morning sun, a symbol of life flourishing after drought. Their journey had been carved by sacrifice, riddled with pain and shadowed by betrayal. The battlefield was no longer a distant horizon of armies, but the tender landscape of healing and love. Alferes took the woman's hand in his, fingers entwining with the promise of unity. "We will guard this peace fiercely, not with cruelty or iron, but with trust, honor, and the fierce love a family commands." She nodded, eyes shining with quiet strength. "Together we stand invincible." Outside the palace gates, the city stirred to life, whispers of the night's unrest fading beneath the chorus of dawn. The rebellion had been quelled, not solely through power, but through truth laid bare. The empire was scarred, yes, but healing, its foundation renewed by the courage of those who refused to surrender hope. A soft breeze swept through the chambers, stirring curtains like gentle waves. It carried with it the scent of jasmine, oud, and desert winds, the elements of a land eternal, resilient, and now finally whole. The Sheikh gazed out once more, the golden light painting the city with warmth and possibility. In the distance, the dunes stretched endlessly, no longer a barren expanse, but a reminder of battles won and a future waiting to be written. Turning back, he saw the woman watching him, her smile serene and free of the fears that once haunted their nights. She stepped into his embrace, their silhouettes merging into one beneath the palace's gilded arches. Their child cooed softly from the cradle, a delicate melody of new beginnings. Alferes pressed a kiss to her forehead, his voice steady and sure. "We have weathered the storm. Now we build a legacy of love." In the sanctuary of their renewed family, amidst the echoes of a desert dawn, the billionaire sheikh found not just power reclaimed, but a heart reborn. And for the first time in years, silence was no longer heavy. It was filled with hope.